All right, new question. How do we be better friends?
How do we be better friends? I think about all the times that I have been hurt in friendships, right? And I want to do the opposite. And I think one of the biggest things that people are afraid of is people forgetting about them.
Yeah.
Man, that's a core fear for a lot of people. And there's a lot of simple ways to show people that you're thinking about them and that you love them.
Yeah.
That's a really cool way of being a good friend. And in today's day and age, that is super easy. I think one of the biggest things that I love to get that I don't get very often from very many people is just a text out of the blue. Like, hey, how are you doing? Like, it doesn't have to be this
You read my mind.
in-depth, like, oh man, like whatever, like I've been doing all these things, or it doesn't need to be this long conversation. It's like, hey, I've been thinking about you. How are you? And surprisingly, there's a level of intentionality that requires that a lot of people just don't have.
Yeah.
And maybe it depends on how you view friendship, and how many people that you're friends with, right? But that simple text, what comes to mind, what comes on my heart when I think of that is like people who who graduated, right? Say they went to GCU, they graduated, they moved out of state.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, they're no longer in the friend group per se because they're just out of the state. They're not coming to events, they're not hanging out.
Yeah.
And those people, like, you'd probably be surprised how lonely those people can feel because all their friends forget about them and just don't check in on them. Like, you'll see them on Instagram, you'll like their posts, maybe comment something. Mm-hmm. But there's something about getting a text out of the blue that's different. And taking 5 minutes to think about the people who you were friends with, during school, maybe even during summer, who you're like, man, I haven't checked in on that person for a while. Shoot them a text, and that's a way to be a good friend. Really simple.
I like that. Yeah. I would say that you were reading my mind because the first thing that I thought of was words of encouragement. Mm-hmm. Like texting people, shooting them a call. I think the best example I have is we're probably on the same page with this, but good friend of ours, Steve-O, he'll just call you up in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of like nothing going on, and just be like, yo, just want to catch up, just chat with you. And I'm like, whoa, no one does this, bro. I was like, I feel honored to be able to talk to you right now. Like, this is cool. But yeah, I think that we get caught up with life and we start to prioritize work, family, relationships, like intimate ones, right? And then friends kind of come after. And so I think we also have a lot of super like shallow friendships, wider group of friends with much less depth to it. Mile high versus a mile deep, right? And so I guess my 10 cents is get better at asking better questions. Like, be way more intentional with the questions you ask. Because I swear, every single time I see my friends, it seems to be the same questions. How you doing? How's life been? That's good. How's work? Great. It's the basic 5 questions that you always ask someone. But then it never really gets past that. Maybe it gets to being something about the day of. Maybe it's at church and we're like just chatting about the service or the message or something. But we never really go beyond that. And I understand that like different scenarios or situations can call for different like time lengths, if that makes sense, in the sense of saying that like you can't just start a deep conversation when you have 5 minutes until everyone's going to leave for brunch kind of thing. Yeah. But I do think that there is a difference in how our tone is with the questions we ask and how intentional we are with even for the little time that we have. I used to work for a coffee company called Dutch Bros, and great company. They're definitely making transitions to trying to operate in a more corporate manner. And so it used to be this place where you can just talk days, like for hours, I mean, so to say, or let's be more practical, minutes, tons of time with like each customer. You just get to hang out, chat with them, get to know them, all that kind of stuff. And so it used to be like that all the time. Every single customer you came in with, like they knew you remembered their face, you knew them, you chat, you talk about life. And there were so many beautiful conversations that came from it. But more recently, they've been really pushing for more speed to be intentional with like their time, because people will get in these lines and there's like 40 of them. So it's like, we don't have time to have 5-minute conversations with every single person. We need to be a little more intentional with like taking care of them on time. So they came up with this phrase, change lives in 45. Because the idea was get them out in 45 seconds. Mm-hmm. Now, I will be the first to say that I was not stoked on the idea, because I didn't like rushing intentional conversations. But I didn't have a choice. And so I had to adjust to my circumstances and just make the most of it. So instead of making the excuse like, I'm just not even going to ask some questions because we only have 45 seconds, or we're trying to aim for that, I'd be like, well, let me just be as intentional as I can with those 45 seconds that I have. So in the same situation, you only have 5 minutes at church. You only have 10 minutes in passing, 3 minutes in passing. You see him at the grocery store. You see him at the gym. Man, I saw someone last night at the gym, and I'm feeling convicted that I should have asked better questions to him, because it kind of just stayed super shallow and then he pieced out. But it's like, you just make the most of each circumstance, be like super intentional with asking those deeper, more caring questions, because that's where it deepens the relationship. Instead of it seeming super casual and very shallow, like the more intentional questions you ask and the more active listening you do and you maintain eye contact, but more importantly, you remember those things and you bring them up later, it's going to make you that much better of a friend, because it shows that you care and you listen and you want to look for that in each person.
Yeah. So there's something you mentioned there very briefly at the end, was that you remember.
Yeah.
They said, something that I do is I just write things down take notes about like maybe something people said. Specifically, if I ask people if they need prayer, I always write that down. Because if I tell someone I'm going to pray for them and I don't, like, that's just,
what kind of friend are you?
I just can't,
I
just wouldn't feel good about that,
Right. Just becomes an empty phrase.
Yeah. An empty phrase, but there's so much power in prayer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you might feel goofy. You might feel disingenuous, to like write something down. Oh, why didn't I just remember it?
Yeah.
But, depending on how many people you talk to, you can be more intentional and have more friends with a little bit more depth if you just remember what they want prayer for, remember what's going on in their life, and that's also super simple as shooting a text to yourself or just writing down a note.
Yeah.
That makes a world of a difference.
Yep.
Because, I mean, you think about it, like classic customer service, like at Dutch Bros, remembering people's names.
Yeah.
If you remember something about someone else, like they feel known and seen and heard, because because you do care about them enough to just write it down.
Yeah. There's a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one of the concepts is that like the sweetest sound to anyone is their own name.
Yep.
So being able to remember that, say it, super huge. I also think like, along with words, kind of like you were saying, is just like positive affirmation / words of encouragement. I don't think we do it enough. I honestly don't do it enough, where I'm speaking that affirmation into other people. We just kind of go through the motions on a day-to-day basis. But if you think about it, it's like, I don't have that many people speaking that affirmation into myself, but I could definitely use it in different ways. And so, because I know that I need it, I can imagine that I could be doing that for other people. And that's a big thing too, is with this, is that more often than not, we'll play the victim card and we'll say, I don't have good friends. My friends are, never around. They never listen. They never communicate with me, all those kind of things. But I've played the same card and realized that like there is way more that I can be doing about the friendship to pursue them. And if they really truly do not, then that's okay. Like, you don't have to. There's no forcing it, but you can find other friends. You just need to be intentional with it, not play the victim card and say, I have no friends, because the only friends that I do have don't communicate with me. They don't trust me, or I don't trust them because, in so-and-so situation and stuff. But there's always more that we can do for the friendship, instead of playing the card of like, because like we're saying right now, it's like, we know what things not to do because we're seeing those things happen, where it's like, okay, well, don't be bad at communication, because when you don't respond to my text messages, it gets really annoying. And like, it makes it feel like, the average person, I think, reads a text message within the first 3 minutes of it being sent. That's what they said. So it's like, I know you see the message, you're just choosing not to respond to it. But I also do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Like, unless that I can say confidently that I always respond on time every single time, I can't play that card of like, oh gosh, they're so bad at communicating. Because the same thing happens to me, and we always justify our excuses. We always seem to put ourselves above them, thinking that like, well, we can justify our means, or justify our excuses, but they can't justify theirs, and I'm going to hold a grudge against them. So, yeah, I think that being a better friend is taking the initiative instead of playing the wait game and just hoping that they're going to become a better friend. Like, you can lead the example in doing that, because no one's really taught how to be a good friend. I don't know where the instruction manual is that I grew up with. I didn't have one. You just kind of have to figure it out,
Yep.
So, I don't know, man. That's my 10 cents.
That's 10 cents.
Put it down. Boom. Oh.